Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we are going to continue setting up our stats component, and we will integrate our stats into our combat system. Okay, now let's create a few more functions to manipulate our base stats. Typically, you do not modify the base stats directly in a combat scenario, but there are times where you may want to modify the base stats. For our purposes in this course, we won't need a function to modify base stat value, but we can create a function similar to set current stat value so that we can set our base stat value. So right click on this function and duplicate it, and we can rename this one to set base stat value. And this function will be a little bit different because we're working with a struct. So if we call add, you can see when we add, we have to specify our base value and our max value. Well, if we do this, we plug in the input, we only have the base value here. And the max value will be left at 0. So what's going to happen in this scenario is if we update the base value, it will set the max value to 0. Now what we could do is we could get max stat value and plug that in here. And that would also fix the issue. But we really shouldn't be setting the value if we don't need to. So what we're going to do instead is go ahead and recombine struct bin, use the find node. We're going to find the input stat, and here we can drag out from our structure, and structures come with the functionality to set members. So with this node, you can set individual members inside of a struct. So in our case, we can only set the base value. And so here, we can set the base value as the input value. And the struct ref will be this struct that we find. However, this won't actually update the value. So let me demonstrate that to you. Let's call set base stat value. And let's go to health. Let's set the base health to 50. And let's get base stat value. Let's get the base stat value for health and print that to the screen. So let's see what result we get. So I'm getting 100. So that means that it's not actually setting it to 50 like we're telling it to here. And the reason why that is because this needs a reference input. So you need to pass the structure by reference. However, find returns a copy of the value. So this doesn't return the value by reference. So since we're getting a copy of the value, we're only modifying the copy. So since we are returning a copy of the value, we are not directly modifying the value itself. We are only modifying the copy. So what we need to do is, after we call this, we need to add it back to the map. We can get stat. So we can get the input stat to know which stat we're updating. And then after that, we get the struct out and add this as the input. Now what this will do is it will find the base stat associated with the key. It will return a copy of that. We are going to set members and only update the base value of the copy of the structure. After it does that, this node will return the modified structure, and this will be added at the provided input stat key, which will be from the input here. And so now what should happen is our base value should actually update to 50. So let's test that out. As you can see, our base value is now 50. So that works. So let's add that to our base stats category. Now let's do the same thing for max stat value. So let's go ahead and duplicate that. We'll call this one set max stat value. Okay, and so instead of modifying the base value, we want to modify only the max value. Okay, now we have all the base functionality of our stats component finished. One more thing that we can do though is, let's go find this function that we created earlier. Let's go ahead and replace all of this functionality with health and take damage with our stats component. So what we can do, let's go to stats component, and let's create a new function and call this function take damage. And this function will need an input. This input will be a float, and we'll call this in damage. Okay. Now let's go ahead and copy all this functionality and paste it into our stats component. We do not need health minus here. So what we can do is we can call the modify current stat value. The value that we want to modify is health. We can take in damage. We can multiply this by -1. So that way it takes our in damage and multiplies it by -1 to turn it into a negative value. So plug that in here. Then here we need to check, is the current health less than or equal to 0? And if it is, we set the character state to dead. But we don't have a reference to the state manager in here. So what we can do is we can get owner, which gets the owner of the component, we can get component by class, and we can return the state manager. So we need to return BP underscore state manager component, and then plug that in as the target. Okay, now compile and save. Let's go back here, and we can delete this function completely now. This function is no longer here, so let's delete it. And we can get our stats component, and we can call take damage. And here we have our input damage. Plug that in here, and we can plug this back up, skipping the print string because we don't need this print string anymore. Just delete that. Compile and save. Okay, let's test this by getting the character to take damage when we press the input. And we'll make the character take 25 points of damage. So I'll keep pressing the input. So everything is working as expected. Now there may be something else that you might want as well. So let's say, for example, we use the stat system for an AI, which we will later in the course. So let's say you select your AI in the map and you want to modify stats from here. Well, you select the stats component, and as you can see, we don't have the option to do that. But if we go to the stats component and we go to the base stats and we select this eye icon here to make it instance editable, we can go back to our map, select our character, select our stats component, and as you can see, we can now modify the values from here. So that will make it easy to add a bunch of AI to the map and just edit their values here without having to create child classes to manipulate the stats for each AI. And with that, the base functionality of our stats system is now finished. The stats system is quite a simple system. However, with the way that it is designed, utilizing enums and maps, this stats system will be easy to extend and easy to modify for your game. Because adding a new value is as easy as going to stats. We'll just call this one example stat value. And then you can go to the stats component, and we can add a new base stat value, example stat value, and set it to a value, something like 50 for now, just for testing. And we can get our stats component, and we can get current value for stat, and print string. And the value that we're going to get is the example stat, and let's go ahead and print that out, and 50. And we can go ahead and modify current stat value. And so let's modify the example stat, and let's subtract 10 from it. And after that, let's print this again, and we should get 40. And that is the expected result. So as you can see, with this system, it is super easy to add new stats or remove them or modify them. This will make things a whole lot easier for you to make your game. And that brings us to the end of this video. In this video, we have learned what a map variable is and how it can be used to create our stats system. We have learned the difference between a base stat value and a current stat value, and we have also created functionality to add stats to a map and manipulate those stats through functions. In the next video, we are going to cover how to create a stat that regenerates, and how we can get that value to update in the UI, or the user interface. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was able to help you, and I'll see you in the next video.